I'm so thrilled to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining. I am Christine Souza. I'm an end-of-life doula, and I am thrilled to have you all here in this space. Oh my gosh. I was telling Melissa before earlier that I'm a little starstruck. It's such an honor to have such an amazing speaker here with us. I am so excited and curious about the work that you're doing, Melissa. To me, it's transformational, and it's also empowering to know that we can do death differently, that we don't have to always go with the traditional methods. And so I'm just really excited to have this conversation. So if it's okay with you, Melissa, I'd like to introduce you with your bio that you shared, and then we'll go in with some questions and maybe share a little bit about yourself. And
Yeah.
if you're open to it, also we'll leave it open for questions, because I'm sure people will have lots of questions. So I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming. I'd love to introduce you to Melissa Meadow. She's also known as the Modern Mortician. She is a funeral professional, an educator, an end-of-life guide focused on bringing transparency and humanity back into death care. After years working inside the funeral industry, she now helps individuals and families navigate funeral planning, green burial, and end-of-life decisions with clarity and confidence. Her work centers on education, advocacy, and dismantling harmful practice within the industry. Through consulting, teaching, and storytelling, Melissa empowers others to make informed, meaningful choices around death and grief. Her journey into this work was shaped by profound personal and professional transformation. Melissa, I'm just so honored to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you first, Melissa, about your personal journey, because I think for a lot of folks that are in this industry, you didn't just decide to work in this industry. It probably started way back on your journey, maybe even as a child. And so I wanted to ask you what first drew you into this profession, and how has your relationship with death changed over the years? So I wanted to kind of start to kind of tease out where this all began, because if you're like me, death has been around me since I was a child. So I have a feeling
Hmm.
it's probably the same as you.
Yeah. I distinctly remember my great grandparents' funerals and their deaths, but and then I was also like the designated person to care for pets that had died. Like I had to bury my mom's cat at one point, different things like that. But the pivoting factor was it was before my senior year of high school. They were interviewing local family-owned businesses on the news. And I was sitting at the table. My mom was in the kitchen, and they interviewed like a plumber and then somebody else. And then they interviewed a woman who is very stoic, very well spoken. She immediately caught my attention. And then they said that she worked at a funeral home and they were looking for somebody to help answer phones in the door for the summer. And I was sitting there paying attention, and my mom goes, "Oh, you should work for the funeral home this summer." And I said, "All right, I will." And I applied. And you know, good old town, small town politics, whatever, because the woman who had been interviewed knew my grandfather, who was a prominent cotton farmer in a neighboring town. I was immediate shoo-in. I mean, I'm sure I could have gotten the job on my own, but it was an immediate shoo-in because she wanted to talk to him and, that kind of stuff. So every day I would go there in the summer, and I would answer the phones, answer the door, sit there. But it was when I was invited back into the prep room to see something that the guys thought would disturb me, when I showed compassion and empathy and intrigue into what was going on, then I was invited back more often. And that is how I got my feet wet in death care.
Wow. And how old were you?
17?
I think it's a calling, right? I think it's a
Yeah.
calling, and not everybody would be intrigued or interested in exploring that. I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful. I'm really grateful that you leaned in.
Yeah. Me too.
Oh, that's awesome. I remember when my first experience was my grandfather had had multiple strokes. And so I spent a lot of time in the nursing home with him, and I was the designated cigarette lighter in the nursing home. That was, of course, back in the day when there was smoking rooms, and I
Uh-huh.
would just light everybody's cigarette. But I remember there was old Joe that didn't show up one day, and they said that Joe had just died, and I really wanted to see him. And for some reason, I'm really glad for that experience. They let me go in and say goodbye to Joe because I had developed this relationship with Joe. I would sit on his bedside commode in the nursing home and just chat away with him. And I'm really grateful for that experience because that was truly the first time that I had seen someone who had passed away, and it didn't scare me at all. And so um, I'm really grateful for those experiences because it's really helped set the stage on the path that I'm on. And so I think it really is beautiful that if we can remember about our little kiddos to encourage them to be a part of that practice, as I'm
Hmm.
sure you're aware. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. So I think when you ask about speaking about bringing humanity back into death care, that's mentioned in your bio, I want to ask you about the experiences that you feel um, that was needed at that time and what you feel is needed now moving forward.
What I have observed in my years working in the funeral industry and on the outskirts of it is that it is a business first and foremost, and their job is to make money. And I equate it these days, it feels more like a car sales transaction working with a funeral home than it does working with an insurance person, somebody that maybe like your State Farm guy or something, those relate, or your hairstylist. I feel like death care should be neighborly and community driven and not profit driven. So over the years of seeing how the funeral industry went from we got to sell them a casket so then that way, or we got to sell them embalming, that way we can sell them a casket to get the visitation, to get the viewing, to get the church service, to get the burial, to now it's like they're upselling in different directions. They're introducing greenwashing into marketing options for death care. And it's not that it's becoming less expensive, it's becoming more expensive. Um, Watching the way that the industry has gone from that model to now, how do we target people in the area? How do we use Google to our advantage? How do we utilize social media to get people to us? And the thing that I keep seeing from the insider view of the funeral industry is some of them, yes, they genuinely want to help the families, but a lot of what I'm seeing when you get past those individuals, the profit and the sales side is still the overall, you know, the gears that are moving the system forward.
Wow. So that's a lot to take in, right? Because when I there's a lot of similarities in just end of life planning, really helping to support people and empower people on how to have a
Mhm.
good death. And I so there's a lot of parallels in the field also about extending life um, without really taking into consideration quality of life.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think about when I think about the funeral industry. I love what you're doing about bringing the awareness. To me, it's a remembering that we can do death differently, and that what you're doing in the sacred space that you offer in your communities, and reminding people that we don't have to do all of these things that's not required. So I was wondering if you can kind of talk to us more about what that might look like if someone wants to plan for I guess maybe let's back up. So a traditional funeral cost is anywhere, I understand, from $7,000 to $12,000, and you probably have a better idea of what the cost is if someone were to plan for that. But um, so let's stop there and let me ask you what your thoughts are about how we can do things differently.
That's a big question. I think first of all, being in this space and learning things to better help your community is the first step. Um, Funeral services and care can range anywhere from bottom end $6.99 for a direct cremation upwards of, you start getting in the full service funeral, $7,000 to $20,000 depending on how big of a funeral this is and what property is involved in the burial at the end. In between, though, you have a whole smattering of options. And whereas you may not be able to get a $6.99 cremation everywhere. And my first bit of advice for people would be, if somebody is offering $6.99 cremation, please don't take that for face value. I had the experience of working for a budget crematory in Austin, Texas, and they offered $8.95 cremation. They were the lowest in town, and then anytime somebody else would try to open up in lower end, then they'd go lower. But what I saw working there, I wouldn't have sent a family member that I loved or cared about there. And the thing I tell people in my classes to look for with places, even if they're the high echelon of funeral care down to the budget guys, your best your best self-defense, I guess, is to visit these places, make unannounced visits, because using your senses is going to tell you everything you need to know about what kind of operation you're dealing with. And so every state is different as to what the legalities are. So you may have a storefront funeral home, but they keep the bodies somewhere else, or they may keep them, in the back in refrigeration. And you really don't know unless you're on site to ask the questions and look around. This place in Austin, Texas, there were many times where if a family member had shown up unannounced, they would have noticed things that were out of the ordinary, like the way the place smelled, or seeing dust on the shelves, just little knowledgeable things, just little things that if they can't take care of the little things, I wouldn't trust them to take care of your loved one. Um, so visiting a place that you're going to recommend to someone that you're working with, or that you may even consider using yourself, um, and not just depending on those online relationships or those, hey, I met you at the senior marketing event and you offer the lowest cremation in town. Cool. I'm going to refer everybody to you. Visit these places, because we're on the verge of the silver tsunami and the death boom, because the boomers are coming. I'm sorry, they're on their way out. But with that is a lot of people getting into the death care space because they see it raining money. And already we know that our parents or their parents, people are struggling to like move finances around just to get people into care homes and things like that. They come for your money in death care too. And if you just have a plan, then you won't be taken advantage of. So things are going to range from cremation. A good range on that would be a couple of $1,000s. Now, your next option would be water cremation. Currently, it's going to be priced more than flame cremation because it's a new technology. On the back end, I can tell you that it costs the funeral home or the facility less as startup and as operational cost than flame cremation does. But so much of the industry has invested in flame cremation, they don't want to invest in a new technology that they're not ready to do yet. That's why it's not as readily available as flame cremation is, because everybody bought into flame cremation once they finally got over the fact that, well, people aren't going to go back to embalming, they want this. So water is going to be the next big eco-friendly thing as an alternative to flame. And the average cost for that is around $2,500. It should go down as the facilities get more abundant, because on the back end, it costs a funeral home operator about $200 to do a cremation, and it costs about $150 on the back end to do the water cremation. And then maintaining the material or the building over time is a lot less, the machinery over time. Then you've got green burial somewhere right there in the middle, where that's going to cost anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000, depending on the property and how far away the burial place is. That's really what it equates to. And when I say greenwashing, it starts with green burial. You see corporate cemeteries going, oh, people want green burial now? Well, that undeveloped back 40 over there. We're going to do it over there, but we're going to charge them more money because we can't do pesticides over there. Yeah. So we'll charge them twice as much to go over there. But then you may have a green cemetery in Washington. Unfortunately, there is not one in Idaho yet. But you can get a hybrid burial. And there's a whole nother conversation to be had that way. But yeah, green burial can vary that way. Then they've got the human composting where it's becoming legalized and things like that. It's going to range from about $7,000 to $10,000, depending on if you have to be sent out of state for the process or not. And then you have to deal with an entire pickup bed full of material. You got to make sure you have a plan for everything after that. So long story short, that's kind of the range on the cost there. So what we're dealing with.
Oh my gosh, so much in there. So let's go back a little bit because there's three things, right? Well, okay, so I think maybe not everyone, maybe everyone. Hey, it's good to see you. Hey, Katie. So just really having a full understanding of what maybe you can just explain to our people here. In the past, it's been just a traditional funeral, where people will have a traditional funeral and burial and then fire cremation. And then you've named a lot of other things that people may not be familiar with. Can you back up just a little bit and explain the aquamation, the terramation, and then the green burial? Because I'm still learning about all of these as well. So thank you.
Sure. All right. Water cremation is the eco-friendly version of flame cremation, except instead of with flame, it's with water. So the body goes into a stainless steel vessel. There's currently 3 manufacturers, and they'll say aquamation, bioresponse solution, flameless, fireless. There's tons of different names, but the palatable name for it is water cremation, scientifically alkaline hydrolysis. So the body goes into a stainless steel vessel, and it's filled with 95% water and then a 5% sodium hydroxide, sodium potassium mixture. So that's your corrosive. Now, everybody goes, oh, Breaking Bad, we're doing bodies in acid. No, 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 stop. It's between that and a spa day for your body. So it's a nice, happy medium. It's like you're sitting in the bathtub just a little too long and your fingers get all wrinkly and they just dissolve. And then it's just bone and water that's left. In the water, it's a beautiful, like iced tea looking mixture without the ice. So it's a swirly brown. If you've ever had a cocktail that has like those shimmery things in it that like shimmer when you stir the drink, that's what this liquid looks like. So it's not stew, okay? It's a liquid and it swirls around because the swirly stuff is amino acids, peptides, salts, fats, everything that's like chock full of goodness for plant life, actually, right? So this is the liquid portion. They call it effluent. It can go down the sewer system and it actually cleans the pipes because of the sodium, potassium, and sodium hydroxide, the corrosive in it. It is actually good for the sewer system if it does that. Or it can be picked up by sod farmers, tree farmers. For example, Be a Tree Cremation out of Colorado has partnerships with tree farmers and sod farmers. That effluent, the liquid, is picked up and it's dispersed back into nature. Now, what's left? The bone. Calcium phosphate at that point. The bone at its most basic element after water cremation is calcium or carbon phosphate. So anyway, your bones are in the tray. The tray comes out. They're scooped into a littler tray, and then they're put in like a Subway sandwich rack, or it depends on what it is. It looks like that. And the bones are dried on the rack. When they're dry, you can touch them and it's almost like they turn into talcum powder because they're at their most basic element at that point. It is more popular right now to have water cremation for your pets because it's legal in all 50 states. It's just a challenge to get it legalized for water because you've got the big corporations going, we don't want to invest in new technology. So they're fighting against it. So it is legal in your state. You mentioned you had somebody in Coeur d'Alene that offers it. And it is a really awesome alternative to flame, especially if you're fond of water and you don't like fire. So the basic element of you that is left goes in an urn and you do whatever you do with an urn. Now, if you're going to plant a tree or something, obviously use a healthy mixture of soil with that always. You don't have to buy a tree urn or anything. But the cremated remains left from water cremation reduction are pH neutral. pH negative is flame cremation, and it can actually harm plant life and roots and things like that. So scattering the water cremated remains is actually neutral, whereas the flame cremated could like char your grass and different things like that. So that's water cremation in a nutshell.
Oh, we have a question. Hold,
Uh-huh.
please. Yes. The process. She's asking about how long does the process for water cremation from start to finish take?
2 to 6 hours. It's going to depend a lot on the elevation. So in Colorado, it takes a couple of extra hours because they don't go to a boiling temperature on these. It's just around in the 200s. So it's the agitation of the water pressure in it that is doing the movement of the water. And then there's one machine that does like a little vibration shake, like you're in a massage thing, and it just shakes you apart. So,
Thank you. Well, I'm a big fan of water cremation. I grew up in
mhm,
North Idaho on a lake, and so as soon as I heard about this sounds so lovely to me. So
mhm.
just want to be returned to the earth, back up on my lake. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful. How about green
Composting.
burial? Can yeah, oh,
Oh,
well, let's do
green burial.
composting. Yeah, let's do
All right.
composting next. Thank
So
you.
composting was originally pioneered publicly by Katrina Spade with Recompose. And I was there when she was initially presenting this to everybody, and it was basically a grain silo, and you put the people in at the top, and they ended up people mulch at the bottom. So I've been around for a long time for this. So it's been really interesting seeing how it's evolved. So you had Recompose come out kind of first, but on the back end, nobody talks about Herland Forest, which is a conservation burial park in Washington, which is not too far from Boise, you guys. Um, it has outdoor vessels, and they source the mulch and materials from the land to go in these vessels, and then the body goes in, and in about 90 to 180 days for the outdoor version, you are turned into composted soil. The indoor version is about 60 to 90 days, and they source all of their mulch and materials, their alfalfa primarily from states away, and then it's trucked into a warehouse, and then the bodies are put in these little vessels like up against the wall and different things like that. So there's recompose, return home, earth funeral, the natural funeral in Colorado. There's some German group has come into the East Coast. Everybody's, oh, this is the new thing. It costs $7,000 to $10,000, and you end up with an entire pickup bed full of material at the end. What are you going to do with all that? So they say, okay, we're going to rebuild all this damaged land. Here's a question that I've been very sincerely asking about human composting that I will always present until I get an answer. I think it's a great idea for urban areas. I think the intention is great. They will not answer anything about PFAS or microplastics. What if we are releasing damaging particles back into these wildlife habitats and things that they're trying to repair with the material that the families can't do anything with because it's just too much. So, for example, they're rebuilding native land in Washington. That's a big deal that they're working with native tribes to rebuild fishing land and things like that. But nobody's come up with soil science about the PFAS and the microplastics. So, what happens when that gets into the water system that is then feeding Olympia, Washington? So, there's just little questions that aren't being answered that I hope that someday they'll be more transparent about. But it is a cool option. And hopefully, they'll offer it for pets as well for people that want to do that. But yes, there is indoor versus outdoor, and there's a lot of greenwashing going on with the indoor, and a lot of venture capitalist and investor money that's also behind that, that's pushing it to the forefront. So you're seeing a lot more of it than its predecessor, green burial, which is the all natural way. It's just, what is it? The old fashioned way of composting. You're put in the ground, but you're just left alone.
So can you talk to us about green burial? Because I've heard the
Yeah.
terms green burial and natural burial. Can you describe what the two are? Yeah.
So, oh, so green burial would be more of a hybrid for me. There's shades of green. Let's look at it like that. So you've got conservation burial is dark, dark green. You've got natural burial, which would be like a heavy middle green, and you've got your hybrid green burial, which would be a modern cemetery that allows you to do burial without a vault or maybe a burial in a shroud with a vault over it so you're touching the ground. So there's shades of green to get. And since Idaho doesn't have its own natural burial park yet or conservation burial park, then you would need to work with existing cemeteries. You would want to find a cemetery that would allow you to be in contact with the earth, whether you're in a wicker basket or a cardboard casket that everybody's painted and decorated, or you're wrapped in grandma's favorite shroud or blanket or something like that. You'd have to work with the cemetery bylaws. It is not a law, a state law, national law, anything that you have a vault or that you are embalmed. Not at all. Those are rules set up by funeral homes and cemeteries. Those are their policies. Because if everybody comes in and sees Mrs. Smith and she hasn't been embalmed and the family didn't want her messed with and she looks like this, they're going to be like, oh my God, everybody's going to look like that. So that's why they're like, no public viewing unless they're embalmed, and we have control over all of this. Catheter band. I mean, I've got all kinds of tips and tricks to keep mouths shut without using invasive methods. But I mean, there's all kinds of things. You can still view a body and they don't have to have tons of makeup on. They're still beautiful even in death. And I really feel like people having hands-on in the care of their person, their friend, their family member in that transition point helps them along the grieving process a whole lot faster because I've seen it.
Well, I want to talk to you about that. Not in a creepy way, Melissa, but I really have been kind of a stalker on your social medias account because what you're doing is amazing. And the videos that you're showing, you're really educating people about, like the most recent one that you posted a couple days ago about how to shroud and just having these beautiful, ceremonies and just really having these beautiful returning to earth. And so I was just wondering if you can explain what you do exactly in your spare, well, I'm sure you have plenty of spare time, but maybe a little bit of your spare time in part of your practice. I
What
know
I
you mentioned you're an end of life doula and a guide, but also you help support people in this process.
Yeah, so the primary piece of the modern mortician has always been social media engagement and entertainment and education. I started in 2016 on social media on Instagram when there was nobody else doing this except Caitlin Doty with the Order of the Good Death. I was the first funeral director that was showing people. We were coming up, picking up bodies at hospitals behind the hospital by the dumpsters. And I was like, this isn't right. Why are we doing this? That kind of behind the scenes stuff was going on before we had TikTok and everything else. So in doing that, like, okay, wait, ask that question again. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So in doing that, that is how I was able to educate people on the green burial and the different things like that. And so I took a break for a little bit after my own colleagues and stuff attacked me a few years ago. I had a mental health break with everything that I was trying to do online, trying to sustain myself, trying to work for a guy that was doing things behind the scenes that weren't ethical. So I took a break from social media for a little bit. I came back in September of last year and started just posting about green burial things again. And Facebook boosted me at that point. And I was able to grow my reach and then from video that I had from working in the cemeteries prior to coming up with having a shrouded body on my hand to be able to show people how to do it. It's not a body. It's a skeleton from Spirit Halloween that's wearing clothes and has a shroud on it. And you can explain that to people and show them, and I can go out in the backyard and I can dig a hole and I can prop up pictures and things like that. I even have families that send me pictures now that I've worked with in the past or have never worked with me and just see what I share. And they're like, will you share my aunt's funeral? Absolutely. Because that's how people learn. They see this and they go, oh, we can do that? Because people are so much like, that's legal? Yeah, it's legal. You just have to have a plan. So many people are like, oh, just throw me in a ditch in the backyard. We can kind of. We need a plan. There's laws. So but besides this, I got certified as a doula. Um, I don't work with families directly. I'm in a rural community where, again, me and the funeral home here kind of butted heads. And so I don't promote myself, but I do talk to people across the country and I help connect them with other active doulas that are able to see them face to face. I teach through International Doula Life Movement, a program like a 2-day thingy through their entire program where I teach you what to expect from the funeral home because it is designed to make money. And you can get the most caring funeral professional in the world, but they're not the top tier. They're not in charge of everything else. So there's always things to understand, like how the general price list is, what is actually legal, what the funeral home's law rules are, those kind of understandings. I also do tutoring now for mortuary science students because there's an influx of people that are interested in getting into this career. And I tell them, you can do this. You don't have to be an embalmer to be a funeral director and to learn what's really going on behind the scenes. But passing that test is a booger because the more times you fail it, the more money that the conference and the American Board of Funeral Service Education makes from these students. So we see a pattern of people failing repeatedly because it's like a trick test. So that's what I do.
Wow. I just want to say thank you because I think that it takes individuals to be brave, to speak the truth. And I feel um, not to get into the whole conversation about where healthcare is going and when we're putting profit before care for people, we've really missed the mark to what you were mentioning about the silver tsunami and the aging population that is happening. And unfortunately, there is opportunity for profit. And I'm not demonizing the medical system, I'm not demonizing insurance companies, but I know that there are folks that are making a profit. So, what I'm reminded of 100 years ago, we all had home funerals, everyone died at home, everyone was buried on their property. There was this possibility of remembering the sacredness of death. And I think that we've just forgotten. We've gotten so far removed from this process of really being able to embrace this natural process that we're all going to get there. We're all going to have our end of life. And so it's, to me, in my mind, it's created this fear, almost as if death is an option.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes to the point of like, oh my gosh, now my loved one is sick, or I'm terminal, and so there's no plan or preparation involved in that experience. And so I really I want, if you wouldn't mind speaking to what would be the process for someone to plan and prepare for a natural green burial or anything like that. I've heard that for me to save money, because Boise and to Coeur d'Alene is 8 hours, I can actually have someone put me in the back of their truck and transport me up there. Is that true? Is there
Mm-hmm.
ways that we can plan for the inevitable journey that we're going to take?
Yes, it absolutely is legal to transport your own loved one in the state of Idaho. Getting them from the hospital, though, might be a little bit of a challenge. Every hospital is going to be different. Some of them will not release to family without a plan because, first of all, if the family doesn't have a mortuary cot, you can't wheel the hospital bed out to the curb. They're not going to do that. So having a funeral director in your back pocket for things like paperwork or transportation is always good. How
Darn, darn,
it could,
darn.
help you transport into the back of the vehicle. You can do it in a pickup. You can do it in the back of a van with all the seats laid down. I could do it in my Honda Fit because I've laid the seats down and put a casket in there before. So where there's a will, there's a way. You don't have to sit them up like, Lampoon Vacation or anything like that. So everybody can lay down. It's okay. So yeah, it's totally okay to transport your own loved one. Some people aren't okay with that, but you have to have a destination. Where are you going to go when you get there? You can't just roll into the funeral home and go, we're here, or roll up to the cemetery and go, we're here. You have to have a plan. And it usually takes a couple of days to get your paperwork together because doctors have to sign off on death certificates. You need transit permits and things like that. So it's good to have access to refrigeration. Or if you're going to keep your loved one at home for a couple of days before disposition, be it cremation or burial, then have some gel packs or something like that on hand to rotate out and keep the body cool. Have more control. Don't take tradition for law. Ask questions. But the best thing to do to plan and prepare for this, if you want green burial, find your green burial spot. 5 years from now, there may be 10 of them in Idaho and you won't know which one to pick from. But if you want to make plans now, you want to look online and see what resonates with you. Does a conservation cemetery where deer are going to be walking over your grave and munching and just nature is happening all around you, and there's tiny markers with like just rocks and there's no ornate decorations, it's nature. If that appeals to you, you want to find those places and maybe visit them, look at their stuff online and see. Or if your grandmother is buried in an ABC cemetery and you want to be in the family plot, talk to that cemetery and say, hey, this is what I want for me. I understand grandma's been embalmed, she's in a vault and everything. Great, that's fine. But what about me? My spot. Can I not have a vault? If you're worried about driving over the graves later and it caving in, can we take my vault and butter dish it over me? They'll work with you because they see that this is the only way to get people back into their cemeteries because of the profit loss from cremation. If they can appeal to you and get you in with green burial, then they are going to work with you in what they will allow in their cemetery and how to get what appeals to you in that direction. So
I wanted to ask you a question. What are some myths about green burials that you'd like to dispel?
that you have to do it within 24 hours. That's something I see online often. Again, any reputable funeral home should have access to refrigeration. We're in the middle of a global warming crisis. Like, how many times have we seen in the news bodies were found rotting and da, 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 da. We have access to refrigeration. We should use it. So that would be the biggest one. The second biggest one is that you can't get it. You can always get it, just like with the butter dishing and things like that. It's just going to be what degree of green is it? And then there's more misconceptions with the water cremation and the composting really than green burial. No animal will work that hard for a dead meal. So in the history of ever, you've never read in a Western book that they buried old Jim down by the tree or by the holler and then the coyotes dug him up the next day. It doesn't happen. Now, if people bury their animals and that happens, that's a different thing. Humans and animals are a little bit different. But the good depth is about 3.5 feet deep, and people are like, "Oh, y'all thought it was 6 feet." No, that was in the plague times. So yeah, they worry about that with natural burial, and then they worry about the body smelling. Bodies do pass gas. So the only time I've ever had a dead body smell for a natural burial was my own fault for bending them at the waist because they passed gas. Okay, so that's the only time a dead body has ever smelled at a green burial. And then the misconceptions about the composting, they think that you're going to be laid in this vessel and that you're just going to turn into soil. There's a process in between that they don't talk about very often where they dump everything out on a conveyor belt so they can pick out the metals and also separate the bones so they can grind the bones up and then reintroduce them to the mulch mix for the second half of the composting process. So that's a misconception. And then the misconception about the water cremation that it's like acid. And it's not. They can actually recycle the effluent. They do that in Las Vegas, a drought heavy area. Their water cremation place has a filtration and it is able to reuse and recycle water and capture water from rainfall.
Not drinkable, but reusable.
Yeah.
Okay.
For that machine, yes.
So what form of disposition do you prefer, Melissa?
I want conservation burial now.
And I want to talk because I'm in love with our fur babies. I want to talk about your sidekick, Kermit, because I feel like that's really an important thing to be able to support people. And him being a therapy dog, I'm just all about that. I was wondering if you could speak to us about the work that he's doing because I think that that's really important.
Yeah. So Kermit the dog is 10 years old and I adopted him when he was 4 months old and immediately put him into basic training. And I was like, I had several years before I got him, I'd been a cat lady, okay, until my cat died of old age, cancer, whatnot. And then I saw him online and I was like, I love those eyes. And so I went and met him, adopted him, and immediately got him into training for his basics and stuff. And I was like, because I had seen a dog, a poodle, that was advertised in one of the funeral magazines when I was in mortuary school about being a therapy dog. And I was like, how cool is that? How cool is that? An animal working at the funeral home, it just takes the pain away. So when Kermit and I buddied up, he had the immediate personality to be around other people. He was like, you think border collies are like, woo! He was very chill. So we went through our basic training. As soon as he turned 1 year old, we were already in therapy dog training, and they were like, "Psst, we know you have 2 weeks left of school, but do you want to go ahead and test him out early and see if he passes?" And we did. So he was 1 year old, and he was immediately in the newspaper for being the first certified therapy dog in funeral care in the state of Texas. So he accomplished that in 2017. And then he was the first one in Seattle, strangely enough. There hadn't been a funeral dog in Seattle when we moved out here in 2020. Um, and yeah, from there, we did things like he would come to the farmer's market with me, and I would take my pine box casket, and he'd be sitting on top of it. I'd wheel it up there, so people could lay in the casket with him with ball pit balls and get their picture taken. And so it was like interactive stuff. So he was very. It's like come for the dog, stay for the death, or you'll approach the casket because there's a cute dog in it. So that was the gimmick. And initially, he looked like a Muppet. Some people are like, "Why did you name him Kermit?" And I was like, "Well, I almost named him Muppet, but because I was so teaching green burial, I was like, it's easy being green." So Kermit, it became Kermit. And yeah, Kermit has inspired many other dogs to join their funeral home families and become certified working dogs. So yeah, just the amount of people we've been able to reach through just doing stuff and being like, "Hi, deaf, hi, dog," has been really, really cool. So I was telling you before we started that we used to do bow wow reading at elementary school because it felt like low hanging fruit to go to the nursing home. Like, I'm a funeral director. How you doing? So we'd go and do the fun things like we'd go do face painting at Halloween, and the dog would come and wear a costume, just different things like that. So one of the highlights of the career that we had together is we went to a funeral director convention, I think in 2019 or 2018, that was across the country, and we got on the Southwest Airlines flight, and the magazine in front had Kermit on it. He was the cover dog for Southwest Airlines for that month. They were talking about working animals, so that was cool to go to that convention, and he was the cover dog.
Oh,
Hey, hi.
hi, baby.
It's Kermit the dog here.
Thank you for sharing him with us and the world. I
Uh,
love that so much. So I wanted to pause. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone have any questions for her right now? We just dove right in for anyone who is not familiar with this type of offering. If you could, there is a mic right up there on the stand so that she'll be able to hear you.
You talk about laws regarding death and burial, and there's so many different levels of laws. I'm picking up that state is the one you really need to be familiar with, but what about county? What about city? And even federal? I imagine that's too far removed, but are those anything to worry about or be concerned about?
State is the law of the land in death care. It's the state that sets the precedents and the rules for each. Yeah, it definitely runs up to the state.
Melissa, so that's a great question. So what if someone owns property? I'm sure you're like, what if someone wants to be buried on their property in Idaho or in Washington? Maybe the state laws are different, but if someone owns 40 acres up in the mountains and wants to be buried there, it is legal to be buried on your own property. Am I mistaken when I say that?
I don't know about Idaho. I am Googling that as we speak. They just recently made it legal in Washington after years and years of it getting to the house and then getting dropped, where you can establish a family cemetery on your own property in the state of Washington. However, you can't bury other people there and you can't make it a business. So if you're going to do green burials, you have to actually establish a cemetery to do that. In Idaho, yes, you can be legally buried on your own property, but there are a lot of rules and ordinances around it as well. So I would assume that it's going to be the same as it is in Washington, which I can collab up something for you that you can email to everybody out later that will define that better, because I am working on that, but I haven't put it on my website yet. So like home funeral laws and cemetery laws, but typically you cannot be in the city limits. You can't be over well water or any other kind of collecting water, and it can't be in a place where we'll collect water or have runoff. So it's not that hard to find that kind of land. There may be parts or pockets on property that do that, but there's so many other places that don't. So
Thank you so much. This is awesome. So I'm curious, around here, we have all these places that look like ma and pa type of funeral homes, but they're not. They're owned by the big boys. Do you think we'll ever see where they have to say that they're owned by a big corporation so that somewhere on the legality so people know that? Because I don't think people know to ask. Are you, because they all look like they're little small local places and they're owned by Carriage and the other places. Thanks.
SCI, Foundation Partners, Higginbotham. Yeah. So the big tell with SCI or Dignity Memorial is it'll have that tree and it says Dignity. And you'll see that somewhere on the building or on the logo or somewhere. A lot of the places that are family owned will say family owned and operated since this. And it's like their main thing. They beat it into your head, but they put it everywhere. They put it on their website. They'll do it there. They want you to know that they're family owned. But with so many of them being now bought by private equity jumped into the healthcare. They got into vet care. Now they're all jumping into funerary care. So the best thing to do is to ask the people that you're talking to, because they're not required to disclose it. Most of them do, but it's hidden somewhere. But if it helps, y'all are still muted, but if it helps, I think that the future of death care in the next 20 years is going to come back to the individual and not the entity. As people find out that they can do more things on their own, it'll be like I kind of mentioned before, having your State Farm guy. You'll know somebody in your neighborhood that's the funeral person, and it'll be their job to help give. But we're still probably 10, 15 years away from it transitioning to that. But it's starting.
I wanted to ask you, many people avoid end-of-life planning because it feels uncomfortable. What would you say to someone who keeps putting this off?
I'd probably show them an article about an urn ending up at Goodwill, or a picture of an urn floating up on the beach because the people threw it into the ocean without unscrewing the lid and there's air in there. I'd probably start with those kinds of interesting conversations. Ultimately, you can't make somebody make a decision, especially if they're in death denial completely. But at least talking about options, showing visuals, like, is this appealing? Like, I have a friend right now whose father is dying in Seattle on hospice care, and he said, I want burial at sea, Navy burial at sea. There's some logistics there. What kind of Navy burial at sea? Are you cremated first, or is it going to be your whole body? Oh, I want my whole body. Okay. We don't have a naval base in Seattle. Okay, so that's kind of hard. We have to coordinate with something out of California. But if you wanted to charter like your family to charter a boat off the coast of Washington and then have the Navy military people come do honors, so you're not on the Navy vessel, but you're doing this instead, would that appeal to you? So it's having those conversations, because if somebody goes, I want to be a tree. Well, you can't really be, I mean, I know those tree pod things are all over the internet, but I hate to be the one to tell you, we are not going to grease you up like grandma and shove you backwards in the fetal position into this little thing with the tree flopping out of the top. It doesn't exist, and it's not feasible. But there are ways to be a tree. So if you have these conversations ahead of time, you can be buried in a conservation burial forest, and then a year later, your family can come back and do a lovely tree planting ceremony. But if you plant a body and a tree at the same time, as the body decomposes and heats up, it's in contact with those baby roots, and it's going to hurt your tree. So these are all things that I've experienced over my career that I'm shouting from the rooftops and from the internet, that you can do some things, but there's some planning involved. So having the conversation, showing options, I think is the first step. Just engaging the conversation.
So good, so good. My mother wanted to be scattered in the ocean. She's like, just throw me somewhere. And so she was cremated, and then we chartered a boat and we scattered her under the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was beautiful. But it wasn't planned. And I just am grateful that, a little bit of Google and a little bit of, asking questions, that it all came together. But I do think that if we can have thoughtful preparation, I think it helps the family tremendously on what to do. I think that I want to speak a little bit about grief, because in my mind, if we really prepare, knowing that this journey will end someday, I think it really can help the grieving process for those that are left behind. And so when I think about planning, I think about, oh my gosh, it could really be a benefit. I think a lot about Frank Sinatra's song, My Way. I say this all the time, but I'm kind of a control freak. I want to have my family know what I want, and I want them to laugh about it and say, Mom wanted it her way. So,
Yeah,
but I think it's really helpful, and I think it helps with the grieving process.
it absolutely does. As somebody that's seen firsthand over the years, families or people that are involved and people that are like, hands off. It is a different journey through the grief process. If I can share a story with you real quick.
Please.
At Eloise Woods, we had HBO come out and they were filming. No, it wasn't HBO. They were filming something for National Geographic. And we had a family that they wanted to do a home funeral for their abuelo. And the grandson was like, I don't care what my grandmother and my mom and my aunt what to do with keeping his body at home. That's up to them. I love my grandfather. I love him so much, but that's not my jam. But they got him to go to the little home funeral meetings and the little practice shrouding sessions, and he participated in all of that for this little documentary. And at the first saying, this isn't my thing, I'm not really into it, to at the graveside on the day of the burial in tears saying, I can't believe I was able to give this gift to my grandfather and be there for him and to escort him to this final place to shovel the dirt or lay his body in, shovel the dirt, to pack the soil in one final hug, and to come back here and visit him in this beautiful place. It had completely transformed his whole experience and perception of death and dying. So, I mean, just little things like that, giving families permission to, yeah, I'm here at your house now to pick up your loved one, but somebody's driving in from a couple hours away and you don't want to come to the funeral home and pay extra money for a visitation or this and that. Yeah, sure. We'll come back in a couple hours. You're good. Just giving people permission. So that's the big thing.
It's
You
so
don't know
good.
what you don't know.
It's true. And I think that it really helps to empower people to know that they have options. And, but if we can explore, be open, be curious, I think it really helps. I remember my grandmother passed away. She really wanted to be buried, but my aunt chose to cremate her. She died out of state and wanted to be returned to the cemetery that where the town that she had lived in for many years. And I remember just being kind of, sad that she couldn't be like physically buried, but the next best option was a cremation. And I remember this gentleman who helped dig the hole at the cemetery. It was just this old country cemetery in North Dakota, and he just said, don't think about, she's exactly where she wants to be, right next to her son, and I want you to tuck her in. And so we just tucked her in, and I just carry that with me, just knowing that I was part of that process of, it wasn't exactly what she wanted, and I was able to find peace around that whole situation, and I got to tuck her in, and that was a very special memory. I want to talk to you about, ask you, through all the families that you've served, and I know that you've probably served hundreds or thousands of people, what have you learned about grief that has surprised you?
It's definitely not linear. It's kind of all over the place, and you can't schedule grief.
I can go, it hit me, so Father's Day is coming up, and my dad's been gone almost 16 years, and I was at the grocery store, and this old CCR song came on, and I just started crying, and I thought, wow, there it is again, right? And just being reminded, not necessarily the way he died, but remembering the way that he lived. And so that's what I try to focus on. But it is so not linear. It just comes up. I wanted to ask you about what's truly meaningful about some funeral or memorials that you've observed that just kind of stick in your mind. Any experiences that you've had about any services or memorials or
the first one that popped in my head was the one that I did at the zoo in Austin. It's not a real big zoo or anything. It's like a volunteer nonprofit zoo, but the lady loved spending time there, and she was cremated, so we didn't take her body to the zoo. But I had to load a TV and a Zoom thingy or whatever it was to be able to play her video DVD thing. I had to lug this TV into this zoo area. So that one was pretty memorable. But then another one is a lady that reached out to me because she saw me on Instagram back in Austin, Texas, and her husband was dying of cancer. She wanted to do something like she had seen The Order of the Good Death or Caitlin Doty talk about. And I was like, I'm your girl. So went over to her house, talked to her husband. And so the plan ended up being he had 2 kids that were in high school at the time. And so the plan was when he dies, he's going to be in bed and everybody's going to come to the house. We weren't going to a funeral home. We were going to do the burial at Eloise Woods. And at first he talked about a pine box casket, but his kids did art stuff with him. And he was like, it'd be cool to be in a cardboard box. Do you do that? And I was like, well, actually, cremation boxes can be used as caskets. They're just a little bit flimsy, you just have to support them, and on the bottom so they don't bend. But yeah, you can absolutely use those. And so when he died, not only was I bringing gel packs that I already had fished off of Facebook Marketplace, or actually you just go in Facebook groups and be like, hey, does anybody have any like gel packs from like medication or food? I'm doing a home funeral. You would be surprised how many gel packs you will get because people want to know what the hell are you doing? So that's a great way to engage your community, by the way, is asking for gel packs for a home funeral. But getting that together and then taking the cardboard box, we set it up in the living room. The kids got the paint out. They set up a Facebook thing where his friends could log in and watch them paint on the casket or leave messages on the casket for them. And when we did his burial, I still have photographs that I post every now and then about it. He had like a picture of ramen on his his little casket and all kinds of other things. And while this was happening, everybody's able to go into his room and say their final goodbyes. And there's food in the living or in the kitchen and all of this. And then about 2 months ago, I got a message from the daughter. And she was like, hey, I don't know if you know, but my mom died too. And we did the same thing for her because you were able to help us know that this was okay to do. And so she sent me pictures of they decorated her mom's casket and all of that. And she's buried next to Peter now in their green burial spots at Eloise Woods and their little cardboard decorated caskets. And yeah, I wish everybody could have, I mean, from even going into a body that was individual all day and they have candles all around the room and flower petals everywhere. And it's just, there's so much you can do that you don't know you can do until you do it.
Oh, I love that so much. So when I was a hospice nurse, I remember taking care of a woman who I just loved, and she was full of sass, and she didn't really the nursing staff called her non-compliant, but really she just was tired of being told what to do, I think. And so she kept smoking her cigarettes even though she was on oxygen, and she did all of those things that probably I would do too, besides the smoking. And but what was amazing is that she had a relationship with her daughters, and her daughters did such a beautiful job. This woman had passed away early in the morning, and I was her hospice nurse. I would go out there twice a week, and as she was getting closer to the active dying phase, we would see her daily. And I just kept reassuring the daughters, like, you can keep her at home as long as you want. Just call us and let us know when you're ready. And I wasn't on that day, but one of the other nurses shared with me the experience that he had. He was going to do his daily visit, and he was calling to set up a time to arrange that visit. And they were like, oh, she passed away this morning. And he was like, why didn't you call me? And they were like, we just wanted to spend some time with her. And what they did was they put her in makeup, they did her nails, they bathed her, they put her in the most beautiful gown, they put essential oils, and they covered her in flowers, and they took a picture and they sent it to me. And she looked so peaceful and beautiful, and the daughters were so excited. They got to have this time. The kids were snuggled in bed, the dogs were there, and they were singing and dancing and having this amazing time. And the hospice nurse that was kind of startled that he hadn't been called, once he got there, he realized the importance of this process of getting used to the idea of their mom, grandma being gone. And I think that, again, to your point, like, we don't know until we know. really the options that we have. And I think legally in Idaho, you can keep your loved one for 24 hours at home. And I think the thing that I really want to remember or remind people is please don't call hospice right away. Please don't call the funeral home right away. To me, in my mind, their essence is still there. There, as that spiritual body begins to expand, really allowing ourselves time to really begin to get used to the idea of our loved one not being there. And so don't rush the process. Please just grab a nice cup of hot tea and just be with your person. Don't make the phone calls, just be. And I think what I'm reminded of most about this conversation is that we're not human doings, we're human beings. And so we want to be busy and we want to fill that space with being busy. But if we have plans already taken care of, it can be really a beautiful experience. I wanted to ask you about, you spend your days encouraging and really motivating us to look at death differently. And I just want to thank you for that so much, because what I've observed on your presence on social media and just your like open heart of like, gosh, we can do things differently. Let me help educate in a funny way. Like, oh my gosh, look at her. She's just wheeling this body down the dirt road. And like, it's just normal, just another day in Melissa's world, I would imagine. But I wanted to know, how has this time influenced the way that you live?
I've been in survival mode for the last couple of years, and I'm really just coming out of it. But what inspired me before and even now is that I don't know when I'm going to die, and I do have a lot I want to accomplish. And our goals as humans is to create. And I think the more we can create and put out in the world that's good, the better we're going to feel when that end comes, whether we recognize that it's happened or not.
She wants to know if you're celebrating something special behind you with all the roses.
Oh, I got them at Costco because I'm going to do a photo shoot with my third puppy. So I just enjoy them for a few days before I take them outside and make art with them.
If everyone listening tonight embraced one lesson from your work, what would you hope it would be?
You have options and there are alternatives from what you may believe.
Oh my gosh. I just want to ask, what would be a good way for people to get a hold of you? Because I could ask so many questions. Like I'm already thinking about, so there's a cemetery here in Boise that they call it a hybrid, but only the folks that are of Muslim faith and Orthodox Jewish can be buried in these certain areas. So I was wondering what your thoughts are if someone was not, that doesn't belong to those faith traditions. What would you recommend if they really wanted to have, somewhat of a hybrid, maybe in a shroud on the earth with the, what is that called? I'm going to call it a butter dish from now on, but what is that?
A vault or a liner.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, the vault.
Yep.
So what would you recommend if someone was looking for some type of support, if they really wanted that option here?
If you are tied to a certain cemetery because it's in your neighborhood or your family has used it for X number of years, or it's just your favorite landscape architecturally, then that's okay. And what they're doing in that separate section, they can do in any section, but they just might require that the vault be different. Some cemeteries these days are pre-installing vaults that are double-decker deep. So they can sell you a plot where dad goes in first if he dies first, and then mom goes in the second layer. And they're all already in the ground. So they just have to remove the grass and open it up and put the people in. So with that, I mean, it's really going to depend on how those cemeteries are set up and what they offer in the different sections. So if you're not married to a particular cemetery, call around, because there are still older cemeteries that aren't tied to corporations, or, ones that are owned by the municipalities or maybe by nonprofits that are existing out there. And they're going to be a lot more flexible too. So if you have questions, I love answering questions and helping people figure this stuff out. You can always reach me through themodernmortician.com. But if you're on social media like Facebook or Instagram, I answer my DMs pretty regularly unless they get lost in the flood of stuff that I get. but yeah, I'm happy to help people talk to existing cemeteries even. I mean, if you want me to call that cemetery and be like, why don't you let people that aren't Muslim and Jewish have this over in this section? I'm happy to do that. And you're not too far away. You're just 8 hours away. I can come out there and have a discussion with them. No, but yeah, I mean, or if people want to start their own cemetery, I do consulting for that too. The one cemetery I do have under my belt is a new part for me. Is a green burial pet sanctuary. So we'll start you off with pets if that's is what resonates with you. Or there's getting you in touch with people like Mel Bennett at Life Forest, where she is burying cremated remains with trees and establishing conservation area like that. So if you wanted to get into cemeteries, that might be a direction to go too. So, or if you want somebody to be the concierge and call all the funeral homes in your area and find out who's going to give you what you want for the best price, I do that too. I'll help you find out how to do that too. Oh,
Gosh, you're amazing. You're
thanks.
amazing,
I
Melissa.
try.
I really am sorry that there was pushback for the work that you're doing, and I really want to acknowledge that I think it
Thank
takes
you.
a lot of bravery, and sometimes when our voice is shaky, we need to tell the truth. And so I just really want to thank you, and will champion you and shout you from the rooftops, because it takes people like you to make change.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Yeah.
I just want to thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'll put your information in the chat again. And then I just want to thank you enough. I appreciate your time and all of the beautiful work that you're doing. It's really been an honor to get to know you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Y'all too. Thank you guys for coming tonight.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a good night.
Bye.